sessions with ease. As the event organizer, you simply need to add the link of your favorite streaming or video conference supplier within each session. Adding a link enables a play button for each session. Interaction amongst online attendees is also possible since the Eventscase platform supports Q&A, chat, and surveys in real time. Albeit from a distance, networking is still fully supported within Eventscase through the new video link function in our one-to-one meeting scheduler, as well as through private messages, news feeds, and forums. Eventscase is an easy-to-use, global, modular, multi-language and secure event management software. Discover all of our products at www.eventscase.com.
Hello everyone, welcome back to the Event Tech Talk Show. This is actually episode 8. Before we get started and before we get into this episode, 2 important pieces of information. So registration for Event Tech Live US and Canada is now open. You can go and register at eventtechlive.com or by scanning this handy QR code. Oh, there we go, in the corner. So if you want to scan that, that'll take you straight to registration. We have 3 levels of ticket, and we have VIP and hosted buyer tickets where you can get a refund on your ticket if you meet the criteria, and some general admission tickets. These are on offer on early bird up until the 15th of May. So if you're watching this now and listening to that before then, grab yourself a deal. Second important piece of information, entries are open for this year's Event Technology Awards. There's information about the full list of categories that represent the change in the industry over the last 12 months, so more virtual, hybrid categories representing that, as well as some new interesting technology categories. So go out to eventtechnologyawards.co.uk and check out those and enter if you meet the criteria. Now, if you missed the last episode, which was episode 7, I spoke to Sam Allen on the importance of having a professional MC, virtual event host, and moderator for your event. So you can go and check that now. It's on demand. It's on the Event Tech Live YouTube channel. It's on all the major podcasting networks, including Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Or, in fact, you can simply just type in eventtechtalks.com, and that'll take you to the full schedule of previous episodes. On today's episode, I have 2 really interesting people with me, Oliver Rowe and Philip Mailing from Venue IQ, and they're going to be discussing the crucial importance of content, having it front and center at virtual events, which ultimately attracts attendees and drives engagement. Get my words out right. Please feel free to interact and ask questions in the comments. Phil, Oliver,
hello.
Welcome to the episode. How are you doing?
Hi, Adam. Thank you for having us.
No, thank you for being here. Before we get into today's episode, I always like to give people kind of a background history, how you guys came into events, how you ended up being one of those preferred virtual and hybrid event suppliers out there. So how did the company get started? How was Venue IQ formed?
Sure. So I'll go with that one, as there's 2 of us. So we have been in software for a long time as a business. We started off with a CRM product. So we really learnt how databases, how data systems work, how to build technology, and that kind of came out of a need at the time for a specific use of a CRM, which everyone will be aware of what that's for. And then we started looking at the event industry, and we looked originally at tracking. So you may have seen our sort of Bluetooth tracking product, but we quickly realised that to kind of get delegates buy-in to use the sort of Bluetooth tracking solutions and the badges and things that we produce, we had a really good interface for them so they could get some useful information, some useful data out of it. So we entered the world of apps. We started providing that to corporate organizations, to event organizers. We won some awards for it, which was great, for integrating some AI technology into it for matchmaking, for the Bluetooth tracking, so people can, B2B events could go and hunt down their targets and see where each other are if they've chosen to share location and things. So that's really where the business started. And then it's kind of grown from there. We went absolutely nuts at the start of last year and the end of the previous year off the back of a few award wins. I think our name started to get a bit more known, even though we've been sort of around for 4 or 5 years or so now in the space. And that really erupted for us. And then obviously COVID happened in March. And for a very long time, we'd talked about doing a web portal, building a web portal onto our platform, but literally no one wanted it. No one was that interested in it. Everyone wanted apps, everyone wanted tracking. And then obviously with COVID hitting, we already had the nuts and bolts of our back end. And so we set our dev team, who were no longer delivering events because it had all been paused, to really build out a very rich virtual platform. But we tried to keep our eye on the ball with the fact that eventually events will return in some way, shape, or form. And how can the technology that we build enhance that and help that? So obviously now we're probably referring to it as hybrid events, where there's some element of live and virtual audience, which I think is where it's going to be for some time, if not potentially forever now. And that's really where we came from. But I don't know if Phil's going to add to that.
No, so it's been a roller coaster ride, because all of our, sort of, you build up where we're probably doing even better than we were at the start of last year, with a product that, an element of our product that didn't exist probably come the middle of last year. So it's very quickly been something that we've had to develop and get out there. And I know, like so many other people, but it's almost like building an entire new product, new business through there. And obviously had a lot of success with that, which has been great. Worked with some great names. And the big thing that we've gone through really is the importance of, I suppose it comes back to today, the importance of content. And I think content is central to everything that we do, be it apps, be it the track, even when we, the tracking, hopefully, we already got some people starting to look to come back with physical events on tracking. But even then, the key data we were returning was who was going to consume what content, feeding that back to the AI matchmaking engines and so on and so forth. So content has always been and continues to be absolute center to giving data for who's consumed what content, and also giving people the ability to consume content.
Yeah, and that's driven everything we've built basically from day one, really, because I think we started off looking at why do we go to events as business owners, what in our previous businesses, what drives that, and it is who are you going to see, and then off the back of that, in a live event, that then drives the engagement. You meet people that have been at the same event as you or the same session as you. You exchange the old, do you remember those things called business cards in the old days when you could, shake hands and pass things to each other? So we've tried to, I guess, come up with as much of a technological answer to all those physical touch points as we can with everything we've built out, but trying to make sure it's future proof as well, as much as we can see forward.
I think you're in a really interesting place, because there's no doubt is that there has been not only an explosion of virtual events happening over the last 12 months or so, but also an explosion of quote unquote virtual event providers, all coming in from different angles. But funnily and interestingly enough, in a transition back to hybrid, I question how relevant they are going to be to what I class as the professional organizer community. So they're not companies or corporates or kind of individuals who maybe use events in a way to market their business. They're B2B, they're companies like, I guess, Event Tech Live and AMP Events, who do this as a business income. So they produce events for business outcome. Now, the transition back to physical events and that hybrid element, how many of those companies are going to have all of that technology that you developed pre-COVID in place, ready to go? So it's a unified experience across everything. The data is unified. You're not using multiple vendors for different elements of the event process things. The experience, possibly from the delegate perspective, is also unified as well. They can use Venue IQ online pre-event, post-event, and then the same tools and technology, the apps and things like that, back to the event.
Yeah, and the streaming, often we're often doing the streaming in, I'd say, over 60% of cases now. The actual sort of delivery, albeit once you go back to physical, you start to get to a place where the big boys in terms of streaming organizations and everything get back involved.
Yeah, maybe so. And I'm not sure a company like yours wants to get involved in the nuts and bolts.
I thought, back out slowly from that. Yeah.
It'd be easier just to let it's a totally different animal.
Let the AV guys just give us a feed. That's all we want. That's it. We'll be happy.
That's it. So on to today's podcast and episode. Like you said, content's been part and front and center. But it's interesting that virtual, it seems to have had this like weird kind of transition, evolution, people trying different things, you know, networking front and center and content more kind of like to the back. And like, what's the key things that you've seen over the last 12 months where people, I guess I'd ask you, what have people done right and what have people done wrong? Can you give those two examples?
Yeah, I think the first thing is understanding the drivers that have led a lot of the organisers, and certainly the early stage. They, especially the free to attend events, where they've got a number of delegates to get through the door to sort of please the sponsors or the exhibitors. And I think in the short term, I think everyone thought, what do we do? How do we make sure that sponsors get some value still? And I think there was a worry that there probably was maybe not the same amount of value to a virtual event than a live event. So I think that drove a lot of the behavior to go, well, what do sponsors want? So sponsors want to meet people, they want to network with people, they want leads, they want to sell their product to everyone. And I think that probably led to the whole networking before content, and I think it led to some interesting content choices. I think some of it was probably ended up being a bit death by PowerPoint. I think it was literally just a Zoom call basically that people might be watching, and obviously some of the early events, for needs must for most of it was literally done on things like streaming platforms like Zoom and things. I think what we've seen is that organisers definitely realised very quickly that having an hour-long, 2-hour session of a sponsor preaching at the audience maybe didn't work, it didn't drive, it wasn't interesting. And I think that's where we stuck to our guns really with all of this and kept that content piece absolutely central. It's the first thing you see when you log in, what's going on, you add things to your agenda, you choose what you're going to engage with, and then use that information to drive engagement. So whether that's within side of the session itself, so whether it's a poll or a group chat or Q&A, or maybe it's a sponsor advertising themselves as sponsoring this particular session or whatever. I think that really has changed up a lot now. I think people are more savvy to it. I think people are now spending more time pushing their content and making sure their content is really, really key, whether that's they're hiring out physical studios rather than just doing it over a chat, although obviously lockdown doesn't always allow that when that happens. But I think they really have upped the game on how they deliver that content. And by making that front and center, it should then drive engagement and make people turn up. And I think the events that do that, we see a much higher attendance rate. I think the ones that focus on shorter sessions, so 20 to 30 minute sessions, keep the attention of the audience much faster. And I think as well, those are the ones that we've seen with our customers, the higher level of engagement. So the sponsors that spam out 200, 300, 400 messages to people and just annoy them will get nowhere. But it is equivalent to the live, sitting there with, I remember one of the first events at Live we did when those widget things, the spinning widget things were being given away by people. It's like, they're not leads, it's not valuable, it's just a waste of everyone's time. You can't do that online, really. So people will go, oh, this is boring, and turn off. Or they'll go, they're trying to flog something to me that I don't want, and they'll turn off. And I think because we're now able to use the data behind, Adam Parry has watched his session, therefore, because I'm the sponsor of the session, it's probably worthwhile me having a chat with Adam, because I know he's watched 19 of our 25 minutes, so he obviously didn't get too bored. I think that data suddenly becomes massively valuable. Actually, you could argue more valuable than the in-person data, where people just come because you've got a free coffee or free beer on your stand.
I just give a couple of specifics that, just from my point of view, I think when it first started, people tried to use the sort of physical paradigm in the virtual space. So it was come to our virtual booth, where people will be sitting for you to talk to. And I think people ended up taking the same sort of money or charging the same sort of money, trying to replicate the physical experience online. It just didn't work. Well, I'm sure there's the odd case that people had some success, but generally what we found is that didn't work. What really worked, that people have done well, is realizing that if you're an online event, most of or a large portion of the people consuming the content might watch it on demand. There's not the urgency of you have to be at the event time, and sort of taking that into account in the way that they're producing the content. And as Oliver says, I think where we've seen people do very well, you've got to be careful here. You don't just treat events as one huge segment, because it can be different whether you're an association or a corporate or like AMP running, an event as a B2B area. But I think looking at the format, so using fireside chats versus presentations, keynotes where people just put their PowerPoint up and read it out to you for 30 minutes is nowhere near as effective as sort of the sort of more human interest, human interaction, fireside chat, podcasty type format. That'd be the key things that I think I picked up from seeing various people do this in different ways.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's really interesting from my perspective, because arguably from, let's say, conferences, you could argue that pretty much the biggest reason that everybody's there is to kind of learn something from the presenters. So I've seen many conferences kind of go down the route of having relatively good feedback, maybe some technical issues, maybe it's not as good as the physical event, but we know why that is, because there's just elements of a physical event that you can't replicate online. The beers at the bar, the networking in the aisles, or all those things that kind of go around are just serendipitous, and you just can't replicate online in the same way. And they've done really well because people are turning up to just maybe watch presentations or people speak. However, what I think the trade show world fell into is all of a sudden they became conferences. They became conferences of back-to-back presentations, long-form presentations, which even in the real world are really hard to kind of pay attention to. I'm seeing that same transition of, okay, like what can we do? These exhibitors in trade shows, what do? They come to network with visitors. They come to network with their peers in the industry. So let's change the format. Let's stop doing solo presentations and let's start doing Q&A sessions or sessions like this, because that facilitates more interaction from an audience, even if they're not physically participating in that session. Let's do roundtables and workshops. Take the same content that you would probably present, but let's open it up to get the audience involved in that content so they can have a voice, they can feel more part of it. And in nothing else, it helps build relationships between those exhibitors and that audience in a meaningful way, that like they literally would at a physical event. Totally with you as well, Philip. On the kind of the content time span. I've got the attention span of TikTok at the moment. It seems like I can. Funnily enough, I can get through an hour of TikToks, but put an hour of Netflix in front of me and I'm falling asleep on the sofa.
Yeah, 100%.
And I think that's also, I'm not saying that we're going to see event sessions go the way of TikTok, but short, sharp sessions do allow people to almost feel non-committed, and I'll watch 20 minutes. That's fine. I can then go and do something else, do a networking session, do another piece of content, refresh my mind. And that seems to be the way that people are getting more value out of the content. I think
it's that time bar, isn't it? And a physical event, the audience doesn't have control of the time bar. I can't suddenly say this section's boring. I want to go on to, I'm going to scrub through this and see if I can get there. But it is in the hands, and as we say, above 60, probably over 70% in the more recent ones of the content is watched on demand on events that we come across. And obviously, it's a much longer time span, right? Because a lot of people are leaving conferences open for 2 weeks. 4 weeks, but the ones we've seen that have been really successful is they've gone afterwards and even put little breaks to where, so a bit like you get on good YouTube channels where at 2 minutes has this been mentioned, at 5 minutes this topic, and quite often people they'll go in, have a look at that. They might then go straight to something they like, and if they like that, they might then rewind and watch the whole thing. But they've got control over it, and to hide the fact they've got control over it is you're sort of fighting a losing battle. You've got to understand that is how they're going to consume, and let them have more chance to consume it.
I think there's been a massive shift as well between like early days. Everyone was obsessed with everything has to be live because the conference is always live, and the amount of down in the trenches with our customers where they're desperately trying to make sure it's live, and then because people are at home and life gets in the way and stuff, kids walking into rooms and things like that when one of their speakers is trying to do a conference or whatever. I think content that can be given and pre-recorded and ready is one of the big things to virtual. But that doesn't have to end in hybrid either. I think the content, the ability to make the content even better when elements of it are pre-recorded and then maybe bring in live for Q&A or whatever it might be. Or even we have some customers that will have clearly pre-recorded content, but then they'll have the actual sponsors, representatives or exhibitor representatives, or whoever it might be, actually in the session chatting live as it's going out. But there's so much of it is watched, outside of it. I think, Adam, when I did something on your Event Tech Live event last year, I think if we'd done the same session at the physical event, I think there would have been maybe 75 people watching if all the seats happened to be full, and I'm sure I don't have that much pull. But let's say they were, I'd look at it. I'd look at it and think, wow, that's been a great session, but I don't know who any of those people are. It may be some really good potential prospects for our business. It may be some people that are interested. It may be some students. It may be some. It may be rent a crowd. It could be anything. I just don't know. But online, I think that same session that we did, I think it was a couple hundred people watched it. Well, firstly, that's more chance that people are seeing our content as a exhibitor as we were there. There's more chance that it was to relevant people. And it's more than we could actually ever fit into that live venue. And then I'm sure that things get watched then further on. And we hear that time and time again from our customers. I know you had it, Adam, where you have an exhibitor come in any sort of the industries that we deal with, who would never have come to even the UK to take part in it because of the cost, maybe, to them. A lot of them have had first-time exhibitors, and a lot of them have had massive increases in the delegate numbers because of and it's all content-led. Whether it's they've got an MP speaking or whether they've got, a really interesting, key person from like a Facebook or something like that, a big massive brand. I think that really does then get people to go, oh, hang on a second, I will spend the hour or half an hour or whatever it might be to watch that bit of content. But because they're going through a platform, because they're going through someone like us or one of our competitors, it suddenly opens up a whole new audience to them beyond just that 1 or 2 or 3 days of the live event. I think that's really what the organisers have to grasp onto, and they can actually deliver more value for the exhibitors and the sponsors than probably just that sort of very narrow couple of days, and then pre-event comms, post-event comms, and they forget about it for a year.
And just to add on to that very, very quickly, is quite often we get people wanting that content to use outside of the event. Yeah. And if you actually worked out what would you pay for like an MC'd 20-minute promotional video, if you've got a company in to do it, and compared that to the cost of going to an event or sponsorship at an event, it's minimal, and yet they're able to not only use it at the event, but to say, well, can we have that content afterwards to share on our, once the event's passed and the sort of the exclusivity time's gone, that we can reuse on our website, on our mailings, on our on our marketing, on our PR, and the value continues on.
And that's a symbiotic relationship between the exhibitor, sponsor, speaker, and the organizer as well, because there's going to be some kind of communication probably that carries on there after the event. I know many organizers are trying to leverage revenue for their kind of content, but I think, like you said, Philip, it's probably fair to say, well, this is gated content and a revenue stream for a certain period of time, maybe that's 6 months or something like that. But then if you as the exhibitor or sponsor or speaker then can take that and kind of also promote it, then that's branding and exposure even furthermore for the actual organizer of their event, and the fact that that content existed or was first broadcast or spoken about at that event. So it's a very two-way street that I think I hate to say it, I think most organisers are probably going to try and lock their content off forever and a day. We do have ours gated at Event Tech Live, but anybody that's requested it, we've happily handed that content over, because that's show marketing, that's exposure for everybody else that was involved in that event as far as we can see. But that really brings me to a really interesting question though. If I can't remember what the statistic was, 40 or 60% of this content,
60-70%, yeah.
If that is watched outside of the event, and us as maybe the traditional trade show exhibition kind of led event, what's your advice or what's your thoughts on how we can position that so everybody still gets value, even if those individuals are watching that content on demand? Because ultimately, in this environment, events are lead generation opportunities, aren't they? They're about meetings, they're about demos, they're about connections, they're about lead capture, that kind of stuff. And that takes place over generally a couple of days, maybe 2-3 days, depending on the event. How do you see it, even as an exhibitor? Where do you think, as event organizers, we can get better about making sure that value still exists, even if people are watching on demand?
Yeah,
I think very quick for me. Then Oliver can give his. I mean, for me, I think it's obviously you've got the interaction whilst the event's going on, the chat, the Q&A, the polling. And as Oliver says, some of the best people we see, you'll actually see a representative of the company that might be involved in it or speaking, within the chat whilst it's going on to deal with any questions or queries. I think the thing that I often find hard when I'm attending events is the ability, if I'm watching on demand, to then say I have a question, I have something for a speaker, to make it easier to get in touch with them afterwards. I think this ability that once the event's gone and it's almost, people are there to watch content, but you're not going to have as many people online to deal with chats or meetings or whatever else, is how do I easily get in touch if there's a conversation that I want to keep having with either somebody speaking or organization speaking. And I think everything's pointed towards getting in touch through the platform, which is great. It's what we want to encourage as platforms. But I think once people are watching on demand, how do we give them that route out is something that we've been working pretty hard on.
Oliver, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I think it's going to be an interesting one for organisers to work out how their event runs. So, as you said, Adam, you've got 1, 2, 3 days for a typical. Let's talk about B2B events first. I think corporate is a little bit different because corporate events is normally they've invited their staff or key accounts or whatever, and it normally has a much higher uptake than a free to attend B2B or consumer event in terms of percentages of people attending. But I think if you look at some of the stuff that's come out, I know LinkedIn's done a lot of research that's been published recently. I think what was the number? 75% of organisers agree that they're going to have a bigger. I think it's careful we get this right because organisers have already had digital elements of their events for years. We're talking specifically here about a extended digital version, if you like, of their event for a number of reasons. One, because they want to get maximum bang for their buck for the sponsors, exhibitors, and for themselves and for their delegates. But two, because there is genuinely going to be a physical reason why certain people won't be able to attend for years to come. Whether it's they can't have a vaccine, whether it's they can, but they're still not healthy enough. Maybe they're just not. Comfortable with travel. Still for whatever reason. And there's going to be all these things at play, and I know that will worry a lot of organisers out there. But technology, as Philip said, we've been working really hard since we built the web side of our platform last year from nothing to what it is now. I think as long as organisers have a really solid platform where everything is one ecosystem, so it's not lots of things bolted in together and held together by a shoestring. It's actually been, which we've all seen. It's the experience on the app for the live in-person people and the experience online or the app for people that are virtual. And it's clear that Adam is virtual and Oliver is live, so we know how to interact with each other, and that the platform does that element for them. And then a way of ensuring that the event is Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, for argument's sake, but actually beyond that is other ways to connect with other people, with other exhibitors. And it's about giving exhibitors and sponsors access to those tools as well, because quite often organisers will shut out the exhibitors from delegate lists or things, and it becomes a very, for good reasons as well, because we talked about spam messages and things earlier. Mm-hmm. I think exhibitors have a role to play in this, with making sure they don't take the proverbial with spamming all the customers that are attending the event, because they will just turn people off. But that the organisers help advise their exhibitors that, you do need to get into this roundtable, or you do need to get into hosting some content, because actually yes, we've got virtual exhibition stands and you can have sponsor reps and people can come and do a one-to-one video chat. But when it's online or more online, or there's an element of online, the introverted people are going to be like 100 times introverted online. They won't upload a picture. They won't upload any contact details. They'll literally hide. They won't go and reach out. Whereas in the real world, you or I probably would have grabbed them and gone, "Oh, you've glanced at our stand. Let's chat." You can't so much do that online. But what we can do is we can provide the data for the organisers, who they might, if they've got the correct, privacy rules and things with their delegates, they might then be able to share with their sponsors and exhibitors, say, these 20 people have actually looked at your content and looked at your stand and downloaded your thought leadership piece or your white paper or whatever it might be. And they are so far more valuable things to have than, oh, that guy over there, he's drunk 10 of our beers today at our exhibition stand. I don't really know I had a nice chat with him. I wasted an hour of my time, but I'll never hear from him again.
Yeah.
I think that's something that I think they've really got to focus on. But I still firmly believe that if they get the content right and the reason to go right, then the engagement comes with that.
Yeah.
Whereas if you surround the delegates like a pack of sharks and everyone's trying to grab them for something, you don't even know at that point if they're interested in you at all.
Yeah, I think you put it really eloquently, mate. I think you said wolves at a sleazy nightclub was the analogy that you gave prior to this. Yeah. You are right, and it's really interesting. We unfortunately, I won't name any name, but we saw that copy-paste approach to outreach of delegates. You said you want a virtual platform. We have the best virtual platform on the planet. No personalization, no level of interest, not even a reference to another customer that they might jointly know or work with or anything like that. And those outreach things do fall on deaf ears, because that's not only one person that's doing that, it's probably 50 people that are doing that, and you're just getting that same message. When it comes to the value, though, from a content perspective, content as an exhibitor, if you've got content in there and that's then, you've got some visibility on those attendees, that content being front and center in that audience, even if that person doesn't necessarily want to have a one-to-one call with you, long tail after the event, you've had that visibility, there's been a level of interest there. So there are other forms, means and ways that you can follow up with those people or try and nurture that interest there post-event. I think, information or lead capture around content of other types of content, not just video and live streaming content, but data, statistics, white papers, insight, reportings, all these kind of things are things that people love to download and pass over their information for, because then they just don't know whether they're going to need that right then.
And that's the important thing in the platform as well. I think it should be easier to pass off that information, right? Because you're not having to, you're already through the gate. We already know who you are. You're not like, it's not that, oh, I've got to enter some more info into this LinkedIn, form or whatever. Even though LinkedIn already knows who you are, but they want to do a double check. You don't really have to do that in a platform, because you've already agreed to all the terms. You've already agreed to the organisers' privacy policies and GDPR policies and all that kind of stuff. So your data is protected as far as you've checked as an individual, and as far as the organiser's responsibility will be through those various rules. But I think it should drive better behaviours from the exhibitors, because we have some customers that will shut off the attendee list from exhibitors, so they can't see it at all. So they're solely reliant on that point for the attendees to go to the exhibitor. The problem with that is then the exhibitors turn around and go, oh, I've had really low engagement, because in their mind, they've not been able to spam a load of messages. And I think it's, and I forget who put out, but I love reading all the statistics of different platforms and their experiences. But I saw some stats on that the other day that said, a significant proportion of exhibitor messages to attendees go unanswered, and vice versa, even worse. I think the number the other way around, and it's like, can you imagine? That's like just not being on your stand at a live event. That's just like the guys who were across the road from us at Event Tech Live, who had a bit of a heavy night at the awards ceremony, didn't turn up the next day. We thought it was hilarious because they didn't rock up till about 10:30 in the morning. But obviously, like, their boss probably would have fired them. Like, but online, again, it's not just the delegates that can hide, it's the exhibitor sales reps that hide as well. And I think it's easy to go, it's the platform. No. It's probably a mix of the content was bad, you didn't attend, you didn't respond, you weren't there when you were supposed to be, or you haven't, the amount of times you see data flow in very, very last minute from exhibitors who've paid a lot of money to platforms, to the organisers to put their stuff on the platform, and all they've got is a name and a logo, and they wonder why they get no leads.
Or it's not that type of event.
Yeah,
you can
100%.
have it where like we do a lot of our businesses associations.
Yeah.
And the sponsors still think they're going to get all hot and heavy, and it just isn't that crowd. They're more there. It's more like, the use of television advertising or branding on a website or whatever. You have different ways of pushing your product, your brand, and it might be that the sale just isn't there. And if it's not that kind of event, and I think a lot of this comes down to comms with the sponsors. You wouldn't dream of putting on an event without the pre-event comms, including directions to the physical event, right? The number of times we see people sending things out where there just isn't a guide to how the platform's going to work. I don't care what virtual event platforms say. Number one support query is, I can't log in. I can't find my login details. I can't log in. Whoever you are, number one. So the ability that you're actually going to signpost, this is how you're going to be successful, some pre-event comms that might set it out over a period of time. Here's some tips. We might have a webinar that you can come to where you can learn to get and people just, it's almost like it's just, we have an event at the Truman Brewery. We're not going to tell you where it is. We'll expect you to Google it. We're not going to tell you what, we might tell you sort of what time it starts, but we're not going to tell you anything about anyone who's coming. It's just, if you'd like to, it just won't work. And you got to almost more so on digital, because people do ignore emails. People, don't quite read them properly. You've got to have that comms piece.
Yeah. It's so important. I think you've hit some nails on the head. Like, this time round for Event Tech Live, we've learned some things. We not only do we still had our exhibitor masterclass, which was recorded, as well as being live, so people could ask questions and watch it at their own leisure if they wanted to. But we're having one this time for speakers and for visitors as well. It's interesting how we just expect visitors to be able to figure it out. And we only open the doors to them generally in the lead up to the event. So they might be experiencing multiple different vendors and platforms. So it all works slightly differently. And I don't think any other software or on this planet would expect everybody to get something in such a short period of time in terms of how the functionality works. But that plays back into content. That should be a part of every event's content, right? Mm-hmm. Here's an exhibitor sponsor day. Here's a visitor open day. Here's a speaker open day. That can actually be part of the content in the lead up to the actual event going live, so that people can start to network, connect, and actually see how to get the best from the actual event itself. And it's interesting how we seem to have gone the other way, which is like, right, the event's happening now. Off you come in. Let's get going.
But that's what people always underestimate, the labor element of putting on. I mean, a physical event, you sort of you can plan it a little bit, but the big thing we have is people come into virtual events, or people starting to plan hybrid events, and they don't realize the sort of, I'll say, manpower, people power that's needed to put onto the, to populate a platform, to write those comms, to plan those comms. And I think it's, when we, we've got a number of people that run like more full-time communities on our platform, and that's a whole nother beast in itself. And I think when people, a lot of people you speak to, just about, they struggle to get the power, the people power to actually populate a conference the last 3 days, let alone run a community and those type of. And I just think people always underestimate that sort of. The amount of work that goes into it, and don't put it in, and then suddenly it gets to the day before, and comms packages haven't gone out, and people aren't able to find the support that they want, and you haven't properly, you haven't even shown the sponsor what they're getting. There hasn't even been that, and I think that just so often that falls down.
And this is, I'm going to be very controversial here. This is the major problem with the events industry. The salesperson does the deal. The operations deals with the nitty-gritty of stand, build, design, or the sponsorship. If it's a conference, what's getting done there, are not responsible for customer service. So sometimes can upset people. And I'm not going to lie. I think my operations team have upset one or two customers along the way, probably at Event Tech Live. But funnily enough, a tech company, there's always somebody involved in customer success, right? Like that is a title of many software companies.
Yeah.
Is once the salesperson has sold them, and before they've got to doing what they need to do, there is a customer success team in place to be that hand-holding part all the way through, so the sales team can get on with their job before they get to the actual, I need to use this now and I don't know how to use it. Do you think we'll see that in the events industry? Do you think we'll see customer success teams come into play to be that bridge between sales and operations and stuff?
So I mean, very quick, it'd be interesting to see as we move back into physical and people actually having to put those teams in place themselves. It's very difficult for them to get a payback, right? What we're seeing is, well, they will get a payback. It's very difficult to get an immediate signposted pay, to think salesperson sells this, operations person does this, this role's a bit more woolly until you have to embrace it. What we're finding is a lot of people leveraging our teams. So more and more we're finding, so that they'll want to have dedicated virtual support. So, the little chat bot, they don't want it to appear, we will respond in 24 hours, which you get on quite a lot. It's literally within 2-3 minutes helping people. Emailing directly into the support box. We did an event for a large association that was I think it was 18 concurrent streams, wasn't it, for 3 days, one after another. And we were like even leveraging our team to do speaker management and actually manage the nightmare, all the rooms. But that's more where they're sort of going, well, we can see a value in extending the relationship with the provider to do it, and I think that's going to be an interesting balance when it becomes more physical. Is, are they going to take those teams? Are they going to take those teams for the event organizer, or whether you be an association or corporate or a for-profit event, or are you going to leverage the partners that you've built through virtual to bring in that specialism?
I would say that presents a great opportunity for you as software providers. I know you probably started out just hopefully selling software, right? And
sitting in a broom cupboard, trying not to talk to people.
Developing all those great new features coming out and selling more licenses and things like that. But the events industry is slightly different in the sense that it just put a high value on service and support. And in most cases, people are very willing to pay for it if you ask them for it, and you just say, I forgot to put somebody on to this. There's a day rate. That's actually how the entire events industry is operated. Everybody's on a day rate, and that's how we put events together. But that presents, I know what you've just said there is absolute fact, because just before we started recording this, I had a conversation with a very large organizer who was like, I'm being approached left, right, and center by companies who are telling me that they can offer me support on the platforms that I'm using. But he said, I will happily pay more to my provider, knowing that the buck stops with them, and they absolutely know how their platform works, and I'm happy to invest that. So people are actually willing to pay more than where it may be offered elsewhere, and I guess that goes across content then. So maybe there's a Venue IQ kind of MC host arm and a delegate customer success arm. I think that's great. I think if companies like yourself are kind of moving that way, that narrows down the amount of people that an event organizer is having to deal with. It's a more integrated kind of approach. You guys should get bookings and kind of sign off much earlier in the process, and hopefully even maybe keep and absolutely will keep customers much longer, because then you're not just a platform provider, you're an extension of their team that's helping them deliver that content and that event and stuff like that.
I think when we've gone back to look at how clients have genuinely felt about us, and I think we've published a few of the case studies and things. Obviously, in the early days of COVID, it was a very big scrap to, we just find a provider, just do it, just get it done. And almost without, I think, exception, the biggest thing that people have said in feedback to us is the difference we made was that service, because I think the amount of times the sort of wider sales team for us have come back and gone, they're dealing with this company, they're well known, and they're just not getting any service. They're just literally getting left to it. Now, that would be the real life equivalent would be rocking up at Event Tech Live and Adam, you having to build all the stands and put in the AV and do everything. That is the equivalent of it for the sort of virtual event. And then when hybrid comes into sort of full swing in the next few months as things open up here, and that's definitely a conversation we're having with lots of customers now, that is their fear. It's like, well, how are these things going to link together? How are they going to work? So they've kind of got familiar with how platforms work. They've got familiar with how to maybe deliver the content and to engage their sponsors. But they've now got this new fear of, oh my God, how does this all link? Now, it is not difficult at all. We try and break it down really simply for the customer. Say, right, your live event, you've got you normally record the video, right? Yeah. Okay, brilliant. So all that we do is just take an extra stream out, so that will go to the app and to the web platform. And as soon as you tell them how simple it is, they're like, oh, that's not difficult then, is it? It's like, no, but you won't be doing it, and we won't be doing it. The AV team on site will be doing it. So all you need to make sure is you've got a team that know what they're doing. And there's, we work with a number of different AV partners, and as Philip said earlier, we've delivered some of the streaming stuff ourselves now, which is nothing we set out to do. It's just customers are going, we need this, and we don't know how to do it. We haven't got the team, we haven't got the experience to do it, and we've scaled up our team to do it. Yeah. And I think in the real life world, as you said, Adam, it's a live event, whether it's a B2B show, whether it's live theatre, whether it's a gig you're going to see, it has to happen at time. It has to happen on that day. It has to happen within a few minutes of the start and end time, because of whatever expectations are set. And it should be no different when we're into this hybrid world. And I think there's a lot of different ways they can do it, but having that support is key.
It's so number of conversations we've had where people have gone virtual and they go, yep, so we're going to put on a virtual event. We've had to get rid of, or they've got rid of half my team or 3/4 of my team. We've been so hard hit as an industry. We've got with 3/4 of my team, so I have to deliver it. And you're thinking, but the work you have to do is
twice as much, 3 times as much.
You weren't building the stand, as Oliver said. You weren't doing, you weren't doing all of that. So actually, you break down to what you were doing: comms, organisation. You're basically doing the same amount of work, but you've got half the number of people. And you hit the nail on the head, Adam. Is people are starting to realise that a bit more and saying, well, actually, we'll just get. By the time we've gone backwards and forwards, you may as well have helped us populate. You may as well have helped us get everything ready to go. And for the sake of a relatively small cost, we might as well just do that rather than, I'm already working 18 hours on the lead up to it. We just can't get it in anymore. We're going to have a better experience if we do that.
Yeah, and I think
it's really crazy they left themselves.
Many people made that mistake to cut costs. Let's deal with it ourselves. That saves us money. And then maybe those individuals have actually that time has been taken away from actually making money for the organization by selling more sponsorships, selling more content, selling more exhibitors, because they people can't do more than 2 or 3 things at once. Well, and I think there's always the chance to have an element of unforeseen kind of, what's the word? It's something's been taken away, but you're not quite got that foresight on it until after the event, and it's been realised that, well, we spent all this time actually getting this event ready. We forgot to, upsell our customers or talk to this.
Invite the delegates.
Invite the delegates, exactly. Interestingly, though, and we've just touched upon hybrid. I think this is a question on everybody's mind: is what does hybrid look like? What content formats do you think we'll see kind of go away as we transition back to a physical event industry as well?
Yeah, so I think it's a good question, because the traditional sort of content that will carry on, obviously, is the on-stage stuff. What happens in the situation where you've got 2 presenters? We're doing this chat now. What happens if me and you are live down at EventTech Live? Adam and Phil, for whatever reason, can't be there. So there's technological things that can be done, so Phil can appear on a screen or what have you. But I think the really key content we talked about, roundtables and breakout sessions, things earlier. I think organisers will I think it would be difficult to do those in terms of physical and virtual. I think what they'll probably look to do is have 2 versions of those things. So you'll have a one that's live and a one that's online, perhaps. I think it will be a bit disjointed if they try and do it all at once. And I think that's where the event no longer is 1, 2, 3 days. I think it becomes maybe 2, 3 days of live and then a couple of days of online beyond that, whilst it's also happening at the same time online as well for people. I think that the numbers of live people might go down, the people that are in person. I think, therefore, you've got to try and make the content mimic the online content. So try and keep it to that 20, 30 minute sort of piece. Keep them interesting, keep them, as Phil said earlier, the fireside chats and things work really well because they're engaging rather than just one person presenting. I think those sorts of things will stay. I think the things that will disappear is if people don't have the platform in place to do it. So, we show if someone's in person or if someone's virtual on the app. So if Philip was virtual now and I was in the live environment, we can still set up a one-to-one meeting, but we probably wouldn't do it on the event days. We'd probably do it outside of the event days. So it's keeping the platforms open. It's keeping the comms open. It's explaining to people what it means and what it can do, because it is going to be a little bit different to people. Phil, have you got?
Yeah, I think you've got a mix, right? You've got hybrid isn't just some people who attend and some people who don't, right? It's I could attend then want to consume some we did with this large association with like 18 concurrent streams over 3 days. The best feedback from the people there compared to a physical event, and obviously they like their physical event because it's a chance to meet up and have a drink and speak with colleagues. But the big win was the fact that with so many events, people had to pick the one they went to. There were so many. You attended a tiny proportion of the events. So the fact they could then go backwards and watch again on demand. And I don't think you're going to have, it's not just, they're going to be virtual delegates or they're going to be physical delegates. It's that I can be a physical delegate and then go back and explore virtually. I think for someone like you, Adam, who's looking for packages without, and ways to do it, it's a way to dress it, when you're sort of panicking on the phone and coming up with the frankincense package that includes all this extra inventory, that there's much more for people to go at in terms of inventory for sponsors. And I think I think Ollie's touched on the types of content, so I won't go over that again. But I think the other thing is we might well be in a world. The one thing COVID's taught us is we can't predict anything, right? As soon as you think you're through it, look at India that only like 8 weeks ago was declaring victory over COVID. Now in the situation they're in, you can have a situation where even some delegates could be attending your event and then suddenly they can't. You have a negative, you have a test, you suddenly have a lateral flow test that from one of your kids going to school, and suddenly your physical attendance is out. Yeah, you could be a keynote speaker. You could just be someone who was coming. You can still then get some experience of that event remotely. It's not just I can't go, and as an event organizer, you're sort of enabling yourself to have that backup.
I wonder from a content strategy, and this is only coming to me while we've been speaking about this. This is not the strategy that we have.
We won't charge you for the advice.
There's equal amounts of advice that I've exchanged there, Alan. Just thinking about it, and you rightly said, like, maybe there's a smaller number of people that come to a physical event, and before COVID, everybody was worried, weren't they, about that attrition of an audience if we put this content available online. I think that will still exist for many, because there'll be even more pressure on bringing people into an exhibit hall, that kind of stuff. But now I wonder actually if what we'll see is, let's say, free online content, 2 or 3 days of online content. Actually, initially some stripped back, so maybe go from 3 or 4 stages to 2 stages at the physical event. That saves the organisers some money because they've been able to support the rest of the content online. So it's not that they're doing less content; it's just they're doing less physical content. More emphasis on that physical content being keynote, and you get access to that physical content in 2 ways. You either turn up and you access it for free, or you can pay to access it online as additional premium content. And that kind of, I think, maybe balances things out, because the free content will draw an audience in online, so the exhibitor sponsors still get the value. It will still drive audience to the physical event, because, well, if I can turn up, I can get access to this for nothing, and I might be there for other stuff. And if I can't make it to the event, is this content of value enough for me to hand over some pounds, some dollars or whatever to get access to that, as well as on demand? And, I don't think anybody can argue that from a a knowledge share or a knowledge acquisition point of view, 20, 30, 40, 50 pounds for access to that content is probably not unreasonable, especially when, for me, from Manchester, it's £100 plus just to get on the train to go to an event in London.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of value, and then being able to share that with maybe a wider team and them get access to that content and stuff like that as well. And maybe that's how some people will slice that content. So the in physical is still kept as that premium, top end. This is where the real top quality content is.
Yeah.
And here are your options.
It's already starting to happen with some of the, online, just the virtual event customers that we have, where they have their core free to view content where it's, it's gated, but it's past your details. And then they have an enhanced package to access other types of content. It just doesn't show. Or it might show a preview until they, will pay up. So I think there's opportunities there, which then obviously it's something that sponsors can use, some exhibitors can use. Oh, well, we can give you so many passes as part of a package. I think there's also, we look at how we engage with customers, and we're a very human, personal organisation. We don't have. We're not a huge VC-backed business. We are a privately owned business, and we build what we think is right to build for our customers. And I think we genuinely care, like how we look after them, which is back to that earlier point about the sort of the service and people charging for service. It is a time, there is that time cost. So it's physical human cost, but if it's a virtual support person, you literally do have that one-on-one. It's not 1 to 10 or whatever I see out there. Poor, because I think that's a bad experience. But we very much. We found it harder to get to people than virtually ourselves. So as your with your press out on Adam, as you've reported, we've started taking people on locally around the world to get to those people, and it's not because we necessarily need people there because it looks good or anything. It's because we believe that they're going to give the best service. We believe because they're local people, they speak the language, they understand the nuances with the local events industry. Whether that's corporate or B2B or B2C, whatever it might be, that's our best way to carry on that service. And I think content, obviously, we think is key from our platform point of view, but then that's got to be coupled with delivering the service and experience, because as you said, Adam, we want them to keep coming back and back and back. Now, we'd love to do what some of our competitors do and sign people into 3, 5, 7 year agreements that whether the service is good or bad, you're kind of stuffed. But that's not our way. We want people to stay with us a long time, but without being strong-armed into it. We want them to go, well, it was easy for our delegates to get to the content. Yeah, our exhibitors had a good time because they enjoyed the content and they came back, and we had 1,000 more registrations than we would if it was live, and they were in these different countries because they can't travel. And I think all of that drives the engagement and drives, for us, rebooks obviously as you would have your event, you want people to rebook, and if they've had a good show, the exhibitors like to rebook. So I think all that's going to play a massive part into what happens next with hybrid.
We'll have to see how it plays out, eh? It'll be an interesting time, and I think just as events are, just to finish off, people will dice and slice it in various different ways. I think some will keep very traditional and try and, have it very close to previous existing kind of packages and way of funding things and that kind of stuff. And I think there'll be some, wildly innovative kind of organizations and individuals out there that really come at it from a different angle. Could we see events come out which is you apply as an exhibitor to see if you can exhibit? But then the relationship is more of a partnership and a lead generation, and you pay maybe a fee for the number of leads that you get that are quantitative and qualified, and a small percentage of deals that come out of the back end of it. For some industries, for some individuals, that could be extremely lucrative, and it works in other parts of the world, doesn't it? Affiliate marketing is a multi-billion-dollar business. And that is essentially individuals or people marketing a brand online to an audience that then put sales through.
Yeah.
Are virtual events that different? No, they're just a mechanism to put something in front of an audience that's relevant.
Yeah.
Ultimately, with somebody getting a sale or something out of the back of it. So maybe we'll even see that ways, and then it's relatively low risk for the exhibitor, high reward for the organizer. but they're going to be very analytical on who they let through that door to represent their event and be a part of it, because they're not going to want somebody who's a bit shady or a bit dodgy kind of participating in that. And
I think there's a mindset as well, right? If you're charging as an organizer, if you know that content's being charged, or that, I think your mindset's going to be a little bit different. There's a value to it. You've got to prove a value. Everything you do to approach has to have that within it, as opposed to, I've got 5 hours of free content to fill.
Yeah, very true, very true. Guys, this has been fantastic content. We could probably go on and do a 3-hour Joe Rogan podcast on it, but I know you guys are super busy delivering people's virtual events and talking to them about their hybrid stuff. But for anybody listening, if they do want to reach out and go and check out what Venue IQ are up to and talk about their events, Oliver, where's the best place for them to kind of contact you?
Yeah, so they can go straight to our website, which is www.venue, without an E, so VENU-IQ.com, or they can email us at hello@venue-IQ.com.
Awesome.
So there you go.
We'll put those details in the show notes. Oliver, Phil, thank you very much for coming on today. Everybody that's listened to this podcast or watched, please do give this a share if you found it relevant and you think your network would find it relevant. Please do go after and connect it with Oliver and Phil and the rest of their team. They're a fantastic company. They're really doing some innovative things with the tech platforms and tech solutions that they have on offer. And we'll see you in the next one.